Thank you for joining us. I am Felicity Ezewuike. The Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center, CISLAC, at the weekend added its voice against the $800 million loan the Buhari-led administration has taken from the World Bank as palliative to cushion the impact of the proposed subsidy removal. Its executive director, in a statement, said it feels subsidy removal process has been suspended as announced by Finance Minister Zainab Ahmed. Then the government should return the borrowed money as its purpose has become redundant. So this is one clarification we would require from our guest today, because a day after the reported suspension, the Office of the Minister of Finance issued a statement saying government did not suspend plans to remove fuel subsidy, but has rather expanded the subsidy removal committee to include teams from the incoming administration and the state governors. Please note, the whole point of the loan is to assist in cushioning the expected harsh economic challenges that would be engendered by the removal of the fuel subsidy. The payment arrangement is to span 25 years. Last payment is due on July 15. On July 15, 2051, there are many concerns. There is our checkered history with providing palliatives for the poor, incurring more debts, and the timing of the fuel subsidy removal. Of course, we will incurring more debts and the timing of the fuel removal. Will it end with this administration or not? And of course, CSO's outrage over the huge expenditure being announced at the twilight of the Buhari's administration. To discuss this, I have Munachi, Ugochukwu, Senior Program Officer, Tax Justice, Environment and Conservation of Nature Program, CISLAC, Abuja, Nigeria. We also have Igwe, Political Economy Analyst, Brighton, United Kingdom, and Chimere Ihionu, economist, Abuja, Nigeria. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
All right, Muna, I'll start with you. Let's establish what is reality. Labour and others, including CISLAC, seem to believe fuel subsidy has been suspended. The Finance Ministry says otherwise. Is this a deliberate missed messaging, or was the minister quoted wrongly?
I think that lies heavily on the part of the Finance Ministry to clarify. There was actually a statement by the minister at the end of the April NEC meeting about plans to suspend the subsidy removal process, and so that led to most of the backlash and most of the comments that followed that conversation. But all in all, I think the issues had already started. The reservations that were held around the incurring that $800 million had already been there prior to the announcement of the removal. So I think there's a sustained complaint about the misplacement of priorities, if you may say, particularly as it affects our current debt profile. So the Labour, on its own part, and quite understandably so, has raised concerns over the legitimacy of the subsidy regime from the onset. So we have to unpack some of those issues. You know, is there a basis for the subsidy in the first place? So do we even have to get to the point of discussing a subsidy removal if we cannot establish the legitimacy of the subsidy regime? And then on the part of the transparency of the disbursement process, and of course the growing debt profile, you need to think around how prudent the government has been in managing its financial resources and the fiscal decisions it has been making. We have a growing debt stock. We've moved from the $100 billion as at September last year to 77 trillion naira if we get to securitize the ways and means advances from the CBN.
I seem to be missing, sorry to interrupt, I seem to be missing the point here. Yes. I said when I asked you that, yes, there was an announcement. It seems that Punch reported that the minister confirmed that fuel subsidy removal has been suspended. And a day after, the minister's office issues a statement saying that there was no suspension. That was a day after, at the end of April. This is 7 days on. Your group is saying that you believe the fuel subsidy removal has been removed. And I'm trying to understand, is this missed messaging, or do your group believe that the minister was wrongly quoted?
I believe the subsidy removal has been suspended, and that may most likely be an outcome of concerns raised by the incoming government. I think we can understand if the incoming government feels it is their own primary responsibility to make a decision on the continuation of the subsidy regime. And it has nothing to do with this administration. The administration had 8 years to make a decision on this, and I think it's just moving, passing the buck to someone else. So I think they intended to suspend the removal process.
All right,
based on the concerns of the incoming administration. I don't know if I got that question. I responded to that question.
That is exactly my question, because that's the news flying around. But let me ask Ugochukwu, as a political economist, I mean, you have been following what is going on in this country. Is this missed messaging? Because the actions that are coming up and what we're hearing seem to not to correlate. While you're at that, I'd also want to know, from your perspective, since there is no budgetary provision after June, what happens next?
I think it is clear that the removal, because it's a potentially politically contentious issue, very clearly. And I think that this government has been trying to sort of be careful about when to remove it and how to frame the messaging. I think what is clear here is there's a decision to remove the subsidy if there is no budgetary allocation after June. It's clearly that, technically speaking, the subsidy has been removed. But again, it is clear that there will be backlash, from, sections of the society, from the media, from civil society groups. So I think that if there is anything, the Ministry of Finance is trying to think through the kind of approach they will use in announcing it, and probably they need to do some more engagement with stakeholders before the announcement is made. But what is clear is that the pathway cannot be provided for in the budget. That means that, technically speaking, it's been removed. But again, some of the issues that CISLAC has raised are very important issues because some of the announcements the outgoing government has been making, points to a lot of financial rascality, and for that, it means that there are issues of trust, as it were, by civil society and stakeholders about the sincerity of government intentions. But yes, the subsidy has been removed, will be removed.
Okay, I think you're following the side of CISLAC. It's just a matter of time, in your opinion, as well. It's important I ask Chimere his thoughts on this. Is it missed messaging, or is just a matter of time before it is confirmed, contrary to the statement from the minister's office?
If I could remember correctly, I think there was recently the government sent, I think, a supplementary budget to the National Assembly in order to make provisions for extending fuel subsidy for a little longer. I do not know how long that is, but I think they actually sent a budget. They sent a budget to the National Assembly just last week. If I could remember, last week they sent a budget to the National Assembly for approval. So I believe the government just wants to ensure they are able to stay on with the fuel subsidy until this government have actually left governance for the next for the
so
president.
Are you suggesting that provision was made for maintaining subsidy in this budget that was sent to the Assembly?
Yes, I think so. I could remember reading about it that provisions were made for a supplementary budget for peculiar to fuel subsidy.
Okay, since payment is scheduled to commence with the next administration, these moves indicate that it makes logical sense that the next step is to allow the incoming administration make the call on whether the removal will happen.
Yeah, very true, very true. I think what the present government is doing now is just to take its hand off the fuel subsidy saga and let the next government make the decisions concerning whether to remove or to retain fuel subsidy. But personally, I believe fuel subsidy has actually hurt the Nigerian economy more than it has gained for us. And this is because when we continue with fuel subsidy, it creates a kind of price control system which disincentivize private sector involvement in the Nigerian downstream sector of the Nigerian petroleum industry. So personally, I believe I would go with the president-elect because he has said he's going to remove the fuel subsidy completely. I think that's though the short-run effect will be massively negative for the Nigerian for Nigerians, individuals and households. But I believe with time and as private sector involvement comes into play in the downstream sector of the Nigerian oil industry, there will be some form of precipitating decline in prices. In fuel prices.
Muna, let me come to you. Writing off what Chimere has said, that the president-elect has over time advocated the removal as well, no matter what happens. Is it possible he would choose to work with a plan that is already on the ground and implement the removal immediately, other than wait?
Well, so I think, and I hope that he would have his own plans. The current administration had announced the removal of subsidies quite a number of times over the course of the years. And so I think this should be left to the incoming administration to make that decision. And I hope that they go in the direction of focusing on getting our local refineries to be ready, in time and operating optimally. We have the Port Harcourt refinery, which should be due, which was supposed to be due in April, but that has been extended by 4 months. And the Warri refinery that was meant to be due in November. It's a total production capacity, refining capacity of 445,000 barrels per day. So I think if they are able to focus on that, in addition to the Dangote refinery that should be commissioned in a couple of weeks, which is about 650,000 barrels per day, we are looking at a total refining capacity of just over 1 million barrels, which is quite close to our production volumes of 1.6 million. So I think the right direction would be, and I hope that that's the direction they will be thinking along, prioritizing the optimization of local refineries.
But then again, I'm staying with you, Muna.
Yes.
Should the fuel subsidy the removal fail to happen, it will seem as like a failed promise from the outgoing administration, also taking into cognizance the continued Buhari's good works that was the mantra of Tinubu's campaign. Does that maybe, because however you look at it, the layman says this is missed messaging, I don't understand what is going on. Is it just politics at the end of the day when it comes to whether or not to remove fuel subsidy? And even if it is done now, it might be reinstated just to make a point.
Yeah. Okay. So I think on the issue of sustaining the present administration's intentions, if the intention were to remove subsidy, well, I hope it could have been done by now. But I think more importantly that the focus would be on what should be done as the stopgap measure to cushion the effect of removing that subsidy. And that is where the concerns around the $100 million loan came in. It was for us the issue around why this should be the decision to make, considering our external debt profile. And so the incoming administration may choose to sustain that decision. And I think that would be the right path to go. But the issue would be, what do you have in its stead? So what plans do you have in place to address this? So we need to even remember the reason why a subsidy was introduced in the first place. Basically while trying to meet a local demand, we are importing products because we do not have the refining capacity. And so we are subsidizing the costs to make it more affordable for Nigerians. So if you have to address that problem, you need to go to the point of how do you address the issue of importing refined products. So that should be the starting point. And that is where addressing the refineries comes in.
Uche, let me come back to you. The inevitability of the fuel subsidy removal is upon us. I mean, economists like yourself suggest that it is the best way and the only logical way to go. But there's something I want to highlight quickly. I want us to move a bit back to the loan that was collected, the $800 million. CISLAC, in its statement, said Section 41 of Nigeria's Fiscal Responsibility Act mandates the government at all levels to only borrow for capital projects and human capital development. And they say that they are shocked that the federal government would take foreign debt to distribute what it describes in, quote, as palliatives to Nigerians. This sounds to a lay person like me and many other Nigerians like the borrowing is a violation of the law. My question is it really a violation of the law, this concern that CISLAC is coming up with? When you respond, I will take something quickly from Muna as well.
This is like about for the government to clarify why they are borrowing in terms of what sort of palliatives they're thinking about. But I don't think that information is in the public domain. They are borrowing for palliatives, and it's not being clarified what sort of palliatives. And I agree with CISLAC that the law states clearly that such magnitude of borrowing can only happen, when the government intends to finance capital projects. So there are questions to be answered on the part of government, if you ask me, about why this borrowing and why are they, do they intend to spend it on palliatives at this time. And I think also it goes clearly to point to a whole lot of last-minute decisions, if you ask me, that the outgoing government has embarked on that, that do not recklessness and rascality. And the timing of the decision sounds like, it's very suspicious, if you ask me, especially that we just have a few days to go for this administration to end, and it is not exactly the right time to, get involved.
But Muna, let me see if I wrote it down somewhere. This loan wasn't just initiated. I think it was initiated in 2021. What just happened is that Nigeria got it from the World Bank. Another document was signed in 2022. They are receiving it now. So one would wonder, isn't it redundant to be quarreling over a loan that is just being approved? Wouldn't the right thing have been to query when the process commenced, or even when agreements were being signed?
Well, I think you're correct about the timing of the questioning. But again, it also points to transparency. At the time this loan was in, the application for this loan was initiated, where we communicated, was there a robust stakeholder consultation before this was initiated? And I think that if, for instance, that information was available in the public domain, I am certain that organizations like CISLAC and many others would have started, this same action that were initiated right now, and probably would have been much more effective. But that said, I also think that if the loan has just been approved, the processes of reversing it, if we have found out that, come to think about it, the loan is no longer useful, rather than piling, and I'm sure you know that we have a debt problem. Nigeria has got a huge debt problem, and we have far exceeded the numbers in terms of the amount of money, we're using for debt servicing annually. So I don't think it will be a wise decision, even though the loan has been approved, to continue with it if the reasons for taking the loan do not exist anymore. So yes, I think it's important to have started this engagement earlier than now, but better late than never, if you ask me.
All right, Chibere, before we go on a break, I'd like your 2 cents on this. I mean, is it after the fact? Is it legal? What is even the possibility of returning this money when it seems we always have a need for it?
So I do not know the possibility of the World Bank getting its money back, but I believe the Nigerian government must have gotten the criteria right to borrow from the World Bank. But then again, Nigeria is having a very serious debt issue, and apart from this, we are having a problem where we collect debt for consumption purposes instead of production. No nation that wants to progress would ever borrow to fund consumption expenditure. We shouldn't be borrowing to fund salary payments. We shouldn't be borrowing to fund palliatives. We shouldn't be borrowing for anything that cannot give us return back on investment. And this is the problem with Nigeria. We keep on borrowing for consumption purposes. Nigeria should be borrowing for investment and productivity purposes.
All right, we'll go on a short break. When we come back, we will tilt our attention towards preparing for the inevitability of fuel subsidy removal. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. Now, the elephant in the room for many analysts is our checkered history with palliatives. The verdict of the Civic Advocacy Group budget on the COVID-19 palliative saga was damning. The conditional cash transfers spearheaded by the Vice President of Nigeria didn't fare any better. But this administration is ending. Are you hopeful that the story will be different this time? I'm taking this to Muna. Muna, I didn't forget the part about me asking you your thoughts on whether it's law or not, but I wanted us to move on in the interest of time.
Okay.
So go ahead, let's hear your thoughts. How hopeful are you?
Should I refer to the issue of the law, the legality of exceeding the debt threshold? Because I think we've been quite mischievous in responses to that. More often than not, the government will refer to the debt to GDP ratio, which it happens to fall within the limits, below the 55% limits. But then again, I think it's a liquidity test approach would be a better objective analysis of it. And so that's using a debt to revenue ratio. And we have a threshold of 18%. And the government is above 20 as we speak. So yes, on the issue of legality, the government has flouted that. You had the next question. Sorry, I didn't catch that one.
Okay, I was actually asking about how hopeful you are, considering the fact that we have a checkered history with how we manage palliatives. The COVID-19 palliative was contentious. We also had the conditional cash transfer for the poor. How hopeful are you? We know that the bulk of the work with the removal or not will be done with the incoming administration. We don't know a lot about this administration other than the fact that it wants to ride on the good that was the Buhari's administration. So how hopeful that things will be different and Nigerians would be bearing the brunt of it all?
So yes, I think Nigerians can only be hopeful. We've received, it's been commonplace for us to receive campaign promises that center around transparency and accountability. But unfortunately, that has not necessarily been delivered. So yes, we are really hopeful that if and where the government still intends to extend that arm of philanthropy through its social investment programs, that there will be a lot more transparency and accountability in the disbursement process. I know there have been concerns around disclosing the true beneficiaries of these palliatives, the conditional cash transfer. And it almost begs the question as to how that can be a security risk when you have the beneficial owners of all corporate entities in Nigeria subject to a beneficial ownership disclosure law or provision in the CAMA, in the Companies and Allied Matters Act of 2020. So yes, we believe and hope that there will be a lot more transparency, there will be a lot more clarity. The ambiguity that surrounded that whole process should be clearly addressed. And yes, if
okay,
if you're going to be disbursing, whether it's sorry, please proceed.
Okay, sorry, I wanted to bring Uche in. I thought you'd finished your thoughts at the moment. Uche, we understand you'll be leaving us shortly, so I'd want to ask if you were, as an economist, to prepare Nigerians, their minds for the eventual removal of fuel subsidy, what advice would you be giving to prepare them for this expected financial crisis period?
Well, I think that the simple way to say it is that there will be turbulence on the way and everyone should fasten their seatbelts. And I don't think that it would be fair to judge the incoming government with the performance of the outgoing one, but for the fact that it's the same political party and the incoming government did campaign that they will continue with the works of the current administration, the outgoing one. It would be fair to say that the whole issues around palliatives during the COVID, they were completely mismanaged. And if that is a precedent to look into, that means that, the whole promises of spending the $800 million on palliatives should not be trusted. But then I think that it would be wrong to dismiss the incoming government outrightly because they're the ones, obviously, that will preside on whatever palliatives that would happen. So it would be good to, give them the benefit of doubt. But however it goes, it will be fair to say there will be turbulence on the way, and every citizen, every stakeholder in them.
All right, Chimere, let me come to you. What he's talked about for citizens, what to expect. What I'd like you to talk about is the booby traps with fuel subsidy removal. We've had we've made efforts in the past. We have the case of 2011. There was an attempt even in the administration of Jonathan and others. What booby traps are there that we've learned over time that the incoming administration should look out for when it wants to implement?
So I feel the government needs to talk to relevant stakeholders. Like, people need to know its plan before the implementation of such policy. It is very important. And one of the reasons why the Jonathan-led government, people had it difficult, or people revolted against it, is because they could not talk to key stakeholders. They didn't let the people know what they're about to do before implementing it. The policy just came, and it really shocked everyone. So I believe if you are to remove fuel subsidy, everyone should know, and everyone should start planning ahead for it. Like, the government must ensure that everybody, Nigerians, know that this is what they want to do, and they have to give an exact time that they will do it. It is very important. This is very important to reduce the issues that will later arise.
All right, Muna, I specifically kept this question for you because you referenced who the beneficiaries, something about who the beneficiaries are. It is one of the suggestions that was put forward by CSOs to improve the monitoring and evaluation framework for the proposed cash transfer program, because one of the methods to disburse this 800 million is cash transfer. One of that is the National Social Register. That's what they are going to use as the tool to transfer the money to the vulnerable people. This register, the NSR, warehouses the details of beneficiaries of the cash transfer program. They are saying that this should be made public. That way, we can assess how well the funds are being used by those who need it. Is this one way to help with cushioning the impact of the removal of the fuel subsidy?
So in a sense, in a manner of speaking, you can't underplay the essence of transparency in accountability. There are notional stable needs. And it's always important that we view this from the perspective of how, you expect justice, for justice to be served, it needs to be seen to be served. So in this case, it's not enough to say that there is a register. People need to know what the register contains if you claim that it warehouse this information. So it's not for, so as much a number of CSOs that are familiar with the enumeration process and how eligible beneficiaries were listed into the register. It's very important that the general public is aware of this. I think the government, past governments have had to deal with public distrust, and it's something that the incoming government needs to reconsider as a priority. And one of the best ways to address that would be ensuring, the utmost transparency and sincerity of purpose. You need to demonstrate sincerity of purpose through transparency. So I believe that should be on the top of their agenda.
Amuna, I want to take you quickly to a submission that your group made. It says we already have debt issues, as Uche highlighted, and Chimera as well. CISLAC says we don't need more borrowing. What we need is to cut waste. You cited instances of such waste. You talked about the recent announcement by the aviation minister that they bought 10 firefighting trucks for over 12 million naira. And then there is the on the approval of 24.2 billion to provide internet facilities at airports and some other institutions. You are saying this is reckless spending in the twilight of this administration. I'd like you to firm up on your arguments on that quickly in 40 seconds, if you can.
So I think I would allude to something that Uche had mentioned earlier about the spate of these spendings towards the closeout of the administration. And some of those things are really worrisome. They're hardly justified. I mean, you know, how do you spend that much on firefighting trucks and internet services that could be provided by the internet providers, the service providers? So a lot of focus should be more on tax revenue. It's a fiscal policy tool that has been identified as the most sustainable and reliable means of financing development. Nigeria needs to firm up on that and start looking at how to widen its tax base and then ensure compliance, and then cut to as much extent as possible address tax evasion and avoidance. All right. So I think these are some of the areas we should be looking at while looking to cut wastages. And I also learned that the incoming government may look to consider the Stephen Oronsaye report, which looks at which recommended the shrinking of the government, and these I think these are quite commendable. All right, the start of that way.
To wind things down, we're almost out of time. I'll put this question out to Chimere. Street argument is, it makes no economic sense to keep throwing money at every problem instead of providing the enabling environment to boost SMEs and industrial production. They say this will create employment across the nation and consequently reduce poverty. What's your take? Will the new administration take this route and help us with the fuel situation?
Well, I really hope the new administration actually takes this route. See, there's a saying in economics that the government does not have business doing business. The government should provide the enabling environment for the private sector to thrive. That is the role of the government. Provide good institutions, provide good education and health. These are the determinants of economic development. The government needs to provide the enabling environment, stable politics, low conflict situations. These are what is needed for the Nigerian economy. We don't have a business doing business. Provide the enabling environment. And to conclude, if we don't get our institutions right, if we don't get our politics right, we're never going to get our economics right.
All right, Uche, I think we'll wrap up with you with the question about advice to Nigeria's incoming government on the fuel subsidy removal and advice on how to go about implementing the palliatives.
For this caution, they have to consult as much as possible. They must ensure that there is stakeholder buy-in in whatever they are doing. And for want of a better way to describe it, they must ensure transparency because there's no second chance for the first impression. So they must make sure that whatever thing they're doing, they consult widely, and they must ensure that it's transparent, and they must avoid partisanship. Part of the reasons why we were critical about the outgoing government and the way they disposed their palliatives was the issue of partisanship and lack of inclusiveness. And those are landmines I think the incoming government should
consult
avoid,
widely,
make sure that they trigger the kind of trust that's necessary for stakeholders, at least at their starting point. Yes. That's my sense.
The starting point. Consult widely and avoid partisanship. Very, very important. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Munachi, Ugochukwu, Uche Igwe, and Chimere Ihewanu for speaking with us on The Square today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.